Hello and welcome to our Open Jobs Report Analysis and Review for December 2020. I'm Leslie Whitty, Vice President of Outreach and Communications for the South Central Workforce Development Board. Joining me as always, we have Dr. Robert Boone. He is our President, CEO, and also John Swords, who is the VP of Operations for the board. December 2020, it has been extremely eventful. I'm anxious to see how that's reflected in the data and what you've just been able to discover through that. So, Dr. Boone, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And you really hit the nail on the head. All of 2020 was very eventful and challenging for us all. And that, of course, is naturally reflected in the economy and in workforce development and in open jobs. So we'll get into some details in a little bit. To kick us off, though, I would like to say that as far as job openings are concerned, we have about 1,000 less job openings for this period, which is December, November period, than we did in October. So within 60 days, there were about 1,000 fewer jobs than were in October. And we can attribute that to a few things: the changing economy, COVID ramping up yet again, and other factors as well. But I thought it best, before we get into more specific details, to really speak to why our organization is doing this analysis and review, and also to provide a little bit more context for why we're doing it. So our workforce board serves the 10 counties of South Central Kentucky, and we connect job seekers to employers and employers to job seekers. That sounds like a really simple proposition, but it isn't. There's a lot of moving parts in that, a lot of talent pipeline development involved in that job placement and in that connection. Looking at data is a very key component of what we do, because we are a data-driven organization with our strategic plan and with our focus populations and with our efforts. We try to have data influence our movement in these spaces. So data to us helps us from an internal standpoint, and we want to provide this data to the public, because another dimension of what the Workforce Board does is really a clearinghouse of data for our region to look and make predictions, to make assumptions, and to really see what might be coming down the pike in workforce development trends. So instead of just posting a report, we wanted to do that, but also kind of go through the report in detail. And we are open to communication if there are questions ever about our report. But before we get into the next slide, I would like to say and clarify a little bit of language. We use the term open jobs. That's a good term, but from the outset, I want to say that that's a little bit of a misnomer for the kind of data collection we are undergoing here. We are looking really at advertised jobs, and then making the assumption that those advertised jobs in some part are open jobs. But as we all know, advertised jobs do not equal necessarily open jobs. So for example, as we go through here, a lot of higher level positions and a lot of positions for professionals in the medical field, for example, like physicians, those jobs often generally do not appear on the Monsters, the Career Builders of the world. And that's really how we obtain this information, is through a software called JobsEQ, which scours the internet and finds job openings on sites like Monster and Career Builder and other employment exchanges. So we have job advertisements for a lot of jobs in our area, but not for some jobs in our area. So it's best to look at this really as an advertised job report, and we're trying to make projections and assessments of open jobs while looking at the advertised jobs in our region. So I'll give you just a basic overview before John Swords goes into more detail sector by sector with the data. Leslie, if you'll progress us to the next slide. This is the big picture overview of where we are. As of December, we have 6,151 advertised. Again, advertised, not necessarily open, but advertised jobs in our 10-county area. Of that number, this is really important data to look at. 1,687 of those jobs are part-time positions, which represents 27% of the positions in our region advertised in December are part-time positions. Looking to the next box over, 3,568 of those jobs are $15 an hour or below. That's 58% of the job. So there's some overlap. If we were doing a Venn diagram, there would be some overlap between part-time positions and these jobs at or below $15 an hour. But that's a really sizable number in the market of open advertised jobs for the month of December. The third box over, approximately 922 of those jobs exist outside of our region. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later on. But 15% of the jobs within the 6,151 advertised jobs in December are not even in the 10 counties of South Central Kentucky. And that's challenging when making projections. That's 15% outside of our local economy that are being advertised in our local area and may not exist in our local area even. Some of these jobs are transportation jobs like CDL drivers, for example. Some of these jobs may be work from home types of jobs where you're reporting to a corporate headquarters somewhere else. But these jobs are not in our region. Finally, 60% of job ads do not identify education requirements. And this is really a message for our employers in the region. 60% is a very high number not to include education requirements. And I will say, from my seat and from the seat of post-secondary training providers and high schools, it can be very difficult to recruit and to build the future workforce and the current workforce if we do not know what types of education and training are needed both now and in the future. So I would make a plea for our employers to really start posting educational requirements, if there are any, and training requirements, which I know that any job, even the most entry-level job, will have some level of training or education required. So I make a plea to our employers to please post that. That makes our jobs a lot easier, and in turn makes your job a lot easier in recruiting talent, because we can then provide the talent you need both now and the talent that you need in the future. So please, please, please post training and education requirements. 60% of the job advertisements not identifying education requirements is far too big of a number. So next off, we just have a general overview of the agenda, and I will turn it over to John Swords, who will provide us with that overview and then get into more sector-specific details about the data.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Boone. Yeah, so like we've done in some of our previous episodes, we're going to follow pretty much the same format. We're going to go over our 5 largest sectors in detail. Those are going to be manufacturing, hospitality, food as a cluster, manufacturing, the healthcare sector, professional services sector, construction sector, and transportation sector. And then we'll wrap up with just a few data trends that we're seeing. So let's go forward a slide. So we begin with an executive overview, and some of this data Dr. Boone has already spoken to, but I'll touch on it again in just maybe a little more detail. So first off, I recognize that this is a very busy slide, and depending on what you're looking at, what device you're looking at this on, it might be difficult to see. So I'll as I go through, I'll call out kind of where I am on the slide and explain what you're looking at. So we'll start with the kind of the top middle left, 10 county region. So just to reiterate, The South Central Workforce Development Board covers a 10-county region in South Central Kentucky. All of our data that we pull is specifically out of these 10 counties. We do not run a radius search and pull data from outside of the counties. Total number of jobs in our 10-county region, right? We have 130,500 jobs in our region. Those are filled and unfilled positions. You can see there, top center, major industry clusters. Again, retail, hospitality, food, manufacturing, healthcare and social assistance, professional services, construction, transportation, distribution, logistics, and then everything else. And what I've got those kind of rank ordered by size. So you can see retail, hospitality, food is 28,000 jobs. And then to the right of that is just a pie chart showing, each of those clusters, what percent of the pie that they represent. Going to bottom, kind of on the bottom, all the way to the left, in December, there were 6,151 jobs advertised in the 30-day period. Dr. Boone kind of hit on these percentages, but 58% of these jobs were at or below $15 an hour, 27% were part-time, and 15% were out of region. Leslie, if you could go forward a slide, I just want to take a second to show you an example of what this means when we say out of region or out of sector. So these are two screenshots. The one on the left, what you're going to see is a screenshot that shows the U.S. Army Nashville Recruiting Battalion was posting a lot of jobs in our region. Really, they started this in November and continued it in December. But what you see there is they're advertising for financial management technicians, cybersecurity specialist, veterinary assistant, practical nurse, and you'll see that they were running those advertisements in a lot of different zip codes: Lewisburg, Alvaton, Rockfield, Smithfield, Heston, Munfordville, Adairville, and it goes on and on. So these are for active duty positions. The U.S. Army wants to recruit these folks, get them trained, and then send them somewhere where there's a military installation. So, are they jobs that people in our region could take? Absolutely. But do they represent jobs that are physically in our region? They do not. And so we try to call that out. If you look to the right, there's another example. This is out of kind of the transportation industry. And what you see here is Total Transport of Mississippi was running numerous ads all throughout the month of December across many zip codes. And Total Transport of Mississippi is headquartered in Richland, Mississippi. They do not have a terminal in our region. Had they had a terminal in our region, then I'd say, okay, those I'd probably keep those as, yes, those are legitimate jobs in our region. But in this case, they're just recruiting for over-the-road truck drivers, across many zip codes in our region. And kind of like I said with the Army example, are they jobs for people? Yes, you can take those jobs, but are those jobs physically here in our 10-county region? They are not. So anyway, Leslie, if you go back up, again, so approximately 15% of that 6,151 jobs are examples like that, where they're companies that are just running advertisements with in our region with zip codes in our region, and I think that was 922 total jobs, so almost 1,000 more jobs than what really exist here. Okay, now that I've harped on that a little bit, back kind of to the left center on the bottom. What you see there is just a breakout by education requirements listed in these advertisements. So 29% of all the job advertisements, identified having a high school degree or GED equivalent. 2%, required an associate's degree. 6% a bachelor's degree. 3% master's degree, and then, as Dr. Boone hit on very eloquently, 60% listed no education requirement at all, which again, from a workforce perspective, we want to create the talent pipelines to fill the needs of our employers. But to do that effectively, you got to know what are the jobs and what are the degree and education requirements required, so that we can try to line that up and create the talent pipeline necessary to fill these positions. Okay, moving to the center middle, there's just some median wage information. If you took every single wage in our region and you listed from the very bottom wage to the very highest wage, what would be right there, smack dab in the middle, would be a median wage of $33,600 per year, which translates into $16.60 per hour. Okay, to the right of that is just some unemployment data. 1 year snapshots for for South Central Kentucky and the U.S. And so what you'll see there is, in the green, South Central Kentucky, a snapshot of the unemployment rate in November of 2019, and then November of 2020. So you can see that in 2019 the unemployment rate was 3.8%, and as of November, our unemployment rate was 4.7%. And as a point of comparison, you can see how that compares to the United States, which is right below it. November 19, 3.5% national average for unemployment rate, and as of November, 6.7% unemployment rate. So we are doing, if you look at just November of 2020, that data, we're faring a lot better than the U.S. national average, but that said, our unemployment is still higher than it was a year ago. If you look at all of 2019, the unemployment rate hovered between about 3.5% and 4% all year long. So it never really exceeded 4% all throughout 2019, and we have not gotten back to that level of unemployment yet. All right, finally, just bottom right, a couple key takeaways. First, and we touched on this right up front, if we look over the last 60 days, there's been a big decline in the number of jobs advertised. We're down 1,067 jobs since our October data. And that's largely attributed to what's been going on with COVID, and this has kind of been a national trend with the onset of winter and the surge, this new variant of COVID that's more contagious. A lot of states have gone into shutdown across the nation, and within the state of Kentucky, we had a 3 or 4 week period where the governor shut restaurants down again. And so this really impacted our retail, hospitality, and food sector. For that 1,067 jobs that aren't being advertised, that decrease in job advertisements, over 900 of those were out of retail, hospitality, food. So that's the sector or the sectors that took the largest hit with the closure. So I think that does it on this executive overview. I'll pause and see if Leslie or Robert have any questions or comments.
John, I was just going to add, I know you mentioned that there's a lot of information on these slides. If someone's watching just this video itself, I'd like them to know that if they go to our website and sign up for this as a webinar, all of these slides are instantly downloadable. So that way you have a much larger copy that you can read, that you can save. So that was the only thing I wanted to mention.
And our website is www.southcentralworkforce.com.
All right.
And we'll look at previous episodes, I think. So
it's a good plug. Good plug.
But no, great information, John.
Okay, let's now we'll deep dive into the sectors. So let's go forward a slide, and I'll pause a second and one more slide. Okay, so let's get into retail, hospitality, food as a cluster. What I want to begin with is we clustered retail, hospitality, food because there's a lot of interrelationship between the retail sector, the hospitality sector, and the food sector. Where you find one, you find the other. And one of the commonalities between these three clusters is that they largely don't have a lot of education requirements. They're easy to get into. But that said, because of that, your wage rates are relatively low. Anyway, so retail hospitality food, when we put those together as a cluster, represents 28,000 jobs in our region, and it represents really the largest cluster of jobs that we've got. So again, I'll just kind of go through this slide. I'll kind of point out where I am on it if you're having trouble seeing it on a small screen. So if you look at kind of the top left, total number of jobs in the region, 28,605. That is filled and unfilled. You see they're right underneath that. There's a forecasted annual growth of 1.1%. Now that data, that forecasted growth is that forecast was made pre-COVID. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in that. I think that's going to change based on the next time we get a forecast. I think that'll change significantly based on the impacts of COVID. Moving on, staying on the left and moving down, they're in the middle, percentage of total regional employment. So the total number of jobs in retail, hospitality, and food represent almost 22% of all jobs in our 10-county region. And you can see how that compares to Kentucky, the Kentucky average and the U.S. average. Kentucky average, U.S. average are both, at 19% and change. We're at almost 22%. So really, we exceed state and national average in this cluster by a couple percentage points. And then lastly, bottom left, 3-year percent change in average annual wages per worker, plus 8.9%. And you can see how that compares to Kentucky and U.S. average, which is fairly close to those. I think the bottom line here is that there's been strong wage growth in retail, hospitality, food over the last 3 years, and I think I think that's largely a function of wage pressure being put on them by other sectors. As other sectors increase wages, retail, hospitality, food has to try to match in order to keep people, to keep people working the counters, to keep people cooking, to keep people cleaning hotels, etc. Okay, moving to the middle, in the 30-day snapshot for December, there were 1,392 jobs that were advertised, and that was across 31 different occupations. You can see they're kind of also staying in the top middle. Who were the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days? And what you'll see there is Radcliffe Company Incorporated had 79 job advertisements, Dollar General 48, McDonald's 47. Pilot Flying J 45, and Walmart 45. And then bottom middle, what you'll see is what were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days, so specific jobs. So at number 1, retail salesperson, 381 job advertisements. Below that, first line supervisors of food and preparation workers, then fast food and counter workers, then janitors and cleaners, and then cashiers. So you can see the number of jobs advertised for each one of those positions. And we also provide some wage data. We have the local wage data, and this is average wages, not to be confused with entry-level wages. And so we provide that, but as points of comparison, we also provide, how does our local wage rate compare to the state wage rate, the state average? And we also provide a point of comparison with Northern Tennessee. Specifically with 5, we have access to 5 counties in Northern Tennessee, and there's a little map there on the bottom right that show the 5 counties. They're kind of adjacent to our region, but slightly north into the east of Nashville. And, just because of our proximity, to these counties, we wanted to provide a little bit of, data on what those wage rates look like and how do we compare. Because obviously we have some folks in our region that live here and work in Northern Tennessee, and then we have folks in Northern Tennessee that live in Northern Tennessee that come up to Kentucky to work. So, and then kind of going over there to analysis. So, the analysis on this slide, on this cluster is that 28% of all the advertisements in the month of December were for retail hospitality food. So this cluster makes up 22% of our economy, but accounted for 28% of all the job advertisements in the month of December. As I mentioned up front, this cluster has the lowest average wages and the lowest kind of number of education and credential requirements of any sector. I think one of the things that we found interesting is that 28% of all these jobs, 388 of them were for part-time positions. And then the last thing I've got there is what were the top 3 job titles advertised. And you can see shift manager with 49 advertisements, crew member with 47 advertisements, and retail sales associate with 38 advertisements. So that's kind of the deep dive into retail hospitality food. I'll pause for comments or questions.
John, I was just going to ask, on the top 5 companies, I'm familiar with the majority of those. Do you know Radcliffe Company? Do you know what type of entity they are? I'm not familiar with that name.
Leslie, you would ask me that. I looked this up. I looked this up back in September, because it's either August or September, because they popped up, and I'm drawing a blank as you asked me that now, but I have looked at that before.
Well, no, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't some big thing that I needed, that I should know about. So I know you'll get that information to me.
No, I do know. I did look it up at one point in time, because is this a real thing, and what is this? And I'm drawing a blank on exactly what they do.
Right, and that's a lot of advertisements.
Maybe we can edit that in after we finish recording.
We'll get it in.
Yeah. All right. Any easier questions?
So I Googled Radcliffe Company, and Radcliffe is based in Louisville, and they are part of a fast food and quick service restaurant business. So fast food and quick service restaurant conglomerate, it looks like, with about 2.1 million in sales. This is just on Google. So
that sounds right. That sounds right.
Yes. So I'm not sure about the authenticity of that information regarding sales anyway, but it seems fitting that they would be part of this sector, since they are involved in the food industry.
And Robert gets a gold star. Very, very good work.
Yeah,
he was already on the case.
Saved my bacon again. Food reference, by the way.
Hey, good food reference. Yeah, always good teamwork. So good food. So we're good.
All right. Anything else, or shall we proceed?
I'm good. I'll get you to the next one.
Okay, let's go to manufacturing. And just a quick pregnant pause, and manufacturing. So manufacturing is as a sector is our single largest sector. We have not clustered this with anything else. This is its own sector, and the manufacturing sector represents over 26,200 jobs in our region, and you can see that total number on the top left of the slide. That number 26,223 means that manufacturing represents 19.9% of our total economy, so almost 20%. You can see how that compares to Kentucky at 12.6% and the U.S. average of 8.2%. So really, manufacturing, we far exceed the state in the national average. I mean, it's heavily weighted in terms of overall percentage of what we have here. Three-year percent change in average annual wages per worker is 5.2%. And you can see that slightly exceeds the Kentucky and US average for wage growth over the last 3 years. Moving to the middle, total number of jobs advertised, 441 in the month of December. Now I want to just pause here and say that as I was working on this, I've been a little bothered. This number has felt really low in previous segments, and I was like, okay, let me take a much deeper look at how these numbers are being generated. And I realized that in previous editions of this open jobs report, that when we were running the data, it wasn't capturing it was very specific. It wasn't capturing all the maintenance positions within manufacturing. And so, luckily I figured that out. I wish I would have figured that out a couple months ago, but anyway, so that it's caused this number to tick up a little bit, and now I have much more confidence in this number. Now that being said, 441 open jobs out of 6,100, it still means that this 441 figure is only 7.1% of all the jobs advertised in our region. So when you think about it, it represents almost 20% of our economy, but only represents 7% of the jobs being advertised. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there. It may mean that our manufacturing sector is doing pretty well. If they don't need to advertise, if the average job advertisements are that low, maybe they're doing okay. Okay, so staying kind of in the middle, who were the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days? You can see Metallisa at number 1 with 26 job advertisements. At number 2, Tenneco. At number 3, Toyo Automotive Parts. Number 4, Personnel Placements. And number 5, Nor Bremsey. And you can, for each one of those, you can see how many job advertisements they placed. Going to the bottom middle, what were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days? At number 1, production workers. Number 2, maintenance and repair workers. After that, in the middle, first line supervisors of production workers. At number 4, first line supervisors of mechanics, installers, and repairers. And at number 5, inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers. That's a mouthful. And you can see how many jobs were advertised for each one of those, as well as local wage data, state wage data, and Northern Tennessee wage data. So in terms of analysis, I've mentioned that, as a percentage of our economy, manufacturing far exceeds Kentucky and the U.S. average by over 11%. This definitely means that there's strong market demand for folks for manufacturing, and what those manufacturers are looking for are people with strong STEM skills, mathematics skills, engineering skills, the aptitude to operate machinery and fix machinery. It also means, we have a lot of eggs in the manufacturing basket, so our economy is vulnerable to a manufacturing slowdown, much more so than the U.S. or the state. Last thing I want to point out there, when we break down those 441 jobs that were advertised in December, you'll see that 63% were listed as either full-time or permanent. 6% were listed as part-time, 7% were listed as temporary, and 24% were not. Wasn't specified. They didn't list it at all. So that's the deep dive into manufacturing, and I'll pause here for questions or comments. None. Okay, so let's go to the next sector, and I'll pause here for a second, and let's talk healthcare and social assistance. Again, we've clustered these two. Healthcare and social assistance are individual sectors, but because of the interrelationship between them, we went ahead and clustered them. And as we clustered these two sectors, what you'll see is that there are 16,496 jobs in our 10-county region. These are filled and unfilled positions. This cluster represents 1/8 of our economy, 12.5% of our economy, and you can see how that compares to the Kentucky average and the U.S. average. In Kentucky, the average is 14.5%, and the U.S. average is 14.4%. So healthcare and social assistance, at least locally, is slightly below, in size, is slightly below the state and the national average. And then lastly, you can see 3-year percent change in average annual wage growth. 1.1%, this seems really, really low, especially as you compare it to the Kentucky and U.S. average. This is a number that gets generated once a year, and so I'll be interested. I think that we're hoping to see kind of a new, what the new percentage looks like as it gets published pretty soon, and hopefully we see an uptick in what our local wage growth looks like. But this is really low compared to the Kentucky and U.S. average. All right, to the middle of this slide. So number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days was 1,049 jobs across 68 different occupations. You can see who were the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days. At number 1, Home Instead Senior Care, they had 154 job advertisements. Next up was the Nashville U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion. And in very small parentheses under that, you can, I put in there seeking to fill positions worldwide. There were 100 job advertisements posted by the Nashville U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion. At number 3, HCA with 74 ads. At number 4, Genesis Healthcare with 39 ads. And at number 5, MedCenter Health with 32 advertisements. Center bottom of the slide, what we're showing there is what were the top 5 advertised job positions in the last 30 days. So number 1, far and away the most, was registered nurse, and you can see there were 232 jobs advertised for registered nurses, but you also see a red asterisk there. So this is where I want to pause and talk about this a little bit. Over to the right in the analysis, there's another red asterisk. And when we deep dive into those 232 RN positions that were advertised, what I found for the month of December is that 40 of those positions, or 17% of those positions, were actually for traveling nurses. They were not for nursing positions that were open in our region. They just were looking to recruit registered nurses out of our region to go fill positions elsewhere. And this is a pretty common practice in the healthcare industry. I think most hospital administrators would tell you that, everybody needs nurses, and, they have to hire traveling nurses. So it's just a very common practice. So anyway, I always like to stop and point that out. Registered nurses, and you'll see this again when we get to the transportation, distribution, logistics. You'll see an even bigger percentage of truck drivers that get hired for out of our region. Okay, to get back to the bottom middle, after registered nurses, the second most advertised position was for home health aide, 155 job ads. At number 3, nursing assistants with 116 advertisements. LPNs was number 4 with 116 advertisements. And at number 5 was veterinary assistant and laboratory animal caretaker. Now that position has never cracked the top 5. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Why is that? Well, what I found is that all of those veterinary assistant and laboratory caretaker positions, or almost all of them, are actually being advertised by the U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion. So really, there aren't 45 open veterinary assistant positions in our region. I think the real number is 2 or 3 for the month of December. The rest of them, I think 42 or 43 total were being advertised by the Army. Okay. When I look at analysis, I think I've touched on all of this except the bottom bullet there, which is the top 3 certification requirements. Just want to point out that, looking at what were the top 3 certification requirements required across healthcare social assistance, well, it's no surprise that number 1 would be RN. There were 176 advertisements that listed RN as a requirement, which is interesting when you think that, well, there were 232 advertisements for RN. So some number of RN positions being advertised didn't list RN as a certification requirement or an education requirement. Next would be basic life support. 115 ads listed that as a education requirement or certification requirement, and 69 ads listed certification nursing assistant as a certification requirement. Okay, so that's kind of our analysis of healthcare and social assistance as a cluster for the month of December. Leslie, Robert, any questions or comments?
Just a comment, John. I think now that we've been through a few sectors together, we can all see why this information is so valuable. If I try to put myself in the shoes of someone who's just starting my career, for example, then I would want to know this level of detail. I would want to know not just the wage information, but how many jobs are advertised in our region routinely for these types of careers. For example, if I wanted to be a registered nurse, I would have some really good data to look at here, and I can make assumptions that these openings are going to remain pretty consistent over a span of time, which we've demonstrated months after months after months of doing this, even before we started recording, that the number stays pretty consistent with open advertised jobs in our region for RNs, and that number is also likely to grow. So this really, for our audience, is why we do this level of analysis. For planning as one key part, for our high school students, our college students, those who may be looking to make some career move from maybe the retail hospitality sector to healthcare or manufacturing or TDL. That's why we do this, so that we can all help in better planning career pathways for our job seekers, but also so that our employers know how we stack up, and how we stack up with not only wages, but also how many jobs are being advertised, and also so that we can provide some constructive feedback. For example, going back again to the education requirement, so that we can provide constructive feedback to say, look, if you want better qualified people or people applying at all, then you need to be more specific with the job description in the job posting. So that's why we do what we do. I just wanted to give that another plug.
Absolutely.
And my input was along similar lines. The fact that you've got 232 registered nurse positions advertised, but only 176 of the ads identified the requirement, that shows that there's a disconnect. So, again, it just goes back to the more specific employers can be with their requirements, the better results they'll have, the better it will be for job seekers as well. So I just sort of piggybacked off what Robert says, but it really does let you see how important that is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I think that concludes healthcare and social assistance. We'll move forward a slide. All right, let's take a moment and get into the professional services cluster. So I always like to begin, this is kind of professional services, kind of this nebulous term. So let me define that for you. So what we've done here is we've clustered the following types of professions: telecommunications, data processing, rental and leasing services, professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies, and administrative and support services. So this is a kind of a large grouping of professions that we've titled or clustered and call it professional services. So when we look at this cluster, it represents 12,331 jobs in our 10-county region, which equates to 9.4% of our total regional employment. You can see how that compares, and I'm on the left side of the slide in the middle. The 9.4% is lags the Kentucky average of 12.2% and the U.S. average of 15.3%. In terms of professional services. Bottom left, you can see though that the 3-year percent change in average annual wages per worker is 11.1%, and that number is very, very strong. That represents very strong wage growth over the last 3 years, and you can see that our local average wage growth. How that compares to the Kentucky average, which was at 8.2%, and the U.S. average, which is at 10%. So we are, our wage growth in professional services has exceeded the state and national average, and that's a good news story. Looking to the middle, there were 1,100 jobs advertised in the month of December for, across these professional services professions. That represented 116 different job occupations. Who are the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days? Well, here's a familiar one. At number 1, with 101 job advertisements, was the Nashville U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion. At number 2 was WKU with 70 job advertisements. Number 3, J.P. Morgan Chase & Company with 70 advertisements. Number 4, Home Job Staffing with 48, and number 5, 5-Star with 24. Let me just kind of, going back to Home Job Staffing, that is a marketing and survey. That's a marketing and survey company, and what they advertise is work from home, and basically they're looking for people to work from home and do survey and marketing, do marketing surveys. This kind of goes back and begs the question: are these real jobs? Yes. Are they? Does this company physically reside in our region? No. So we keep it on here, but we also kind of say, well, we see it. I mean, I would say those are out of sector jobs, but they're jobs nonetheless. Okay, so going bottom center, top 5 advertised jobs over the last 30 days. So, and this is consistent every month, very consistent every month. At number 1 is customer service representative. Customer service representative with 141 job advertisements. There's associated local wage data, state wage data, and Northern Tennessee wage data. At number 2, software developer. Let me pause here. The software developer is typically not in the top 5, but it was for November and December. And what's driven that is when you deep dive into it, and it's over here on the bottom left of your screen. The U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion is heavily recruiting for cybersecurity specialists right now. So that's driven that number up significantly. At number 3, financial managers. Number 4, food service managers. Number 5, medical and health service managers. Medical and health service managers are consistently in the top 5, and I always like to point out here's, if you're saying, hey, wait a minute, why isn't that in the healthcare and social assistance cluster? It's because this professional services cluster captures anything that's management. So regardless of sector, if it's a management position, it captures it here as opposed to whatever sector or cluster it came out of.
John, real quick, do we have any credential data on the medical and health service manager position? So for example, I know a director of nursing would probably fall into this category and not the general RN category. A director of nursing would need to at least have an RN credential, if not an MSN credential. Would you be able to do a deeper dive into that, or have you, to see what credentials are needed for the medical and health service manager occupation?
I have not to date, but I can certainly do that.
Okay.
That would be a pretty easy, quick and easy analysis to figure out.
I think that would be interesting to know. And also financial managers, my eyes generally go to that category because I think having done this a while, it is very, very uncommon to see such a high wage occupation in the data. It really sticks out. So
well, I'm glad that you were pointing that out, because
at $121,000 a year, local average wage, what kind of positions are we talking about here?
well, so here's where it gets, okay, so again, this is where this is kind of being artificially inflated. If you look to the top 3 job titles on, in the analysis section there on the bottom right, you'll see that the Army is, they had 48 advertisements for financial management technicians. And so, out of the 60 financial manager positions, 48 of them were coming from the U.S. Army. So the real number is probably 12. The Army positions do not pay $121,000 a year. Those are entry level positions. They're looking for, folks that are 18 to 22 years old that have strong math skills to put them in that line of work.
I see. Are we talking then, once we remove the Army numbers, are we talking about maybe the manager of a financial services firm that is, a really in large part a commission-based type of revenue stream?
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay. All right.
Now, I did not. So there's really 12, and I've not sat down and pulled those apart. Where are those 12? What are they? Who are they with? I've not done that type of analysis, but we certainly could do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I think this goes to the point. It's one thing to look at a number, but you really have to. And we've said it before in this forum. It's really peeling this apart and what is going on, right? So we really don't have 65 software development positions or financial management positions in our region, because between those two, the Army is, 101 of those, when you add those two up and then you subtract out that the Army is advertising 101 of those positions.
Yeah. Yes. And an interesting factor here to look at, and a lens to look through, is really there's an uptick in remote work. And I think that is here to stay as a lasting trend, is remote work. So I don't know if it's the case with the Army, for example, but I know in the software development category, in that industry, there is a very keen understanding that many of the workers are remote workers. You may be working for a company based in California, but you could work from Kentucky. And that really has inspired our organization to start a coding academy, which launches within the next couple of weeks. And hopefully we will fill subsequent cohorts after this first trial cohort. But that's all in anticipation of jobs that are going to be both remote, but also growing as an emerging industry in our region for software developers.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the start of the Coding Academy. Yeah, and I think your point, Lars, just to kind of go down a little bit of a path here, where we sit as a workforce board, we serve employers, and we serve job seekers, and we serve community leaders. And, I guess it's not a dilemma, but on one hand, what's the real number of jobs in our region? I mean, because our community leadership, our employers, our political leaders, they need to know that number. What's that true number? But on the other, we serve job seekers, and what are the true number of jobs in our region? And so, time and again in this forum today and in previous sessions, yeah, there are a lot of jobs, but not every job is in our region, and we're always trying to kind of split hairs on that and point that out, because that I think that has importance. I think that has a lot of importance depending on who you're talking to, whether you're talking to job seekers. Yeah, we have the jobs, They might not all be here. It could be remote work. It could be, being an over-the-road trucker. But on the other hand, it's not a sky is falling. Oh my gosh, how are we going to fill 6,000, 7,000 jobs in our region? Because there truly aren't that many. If you base it off of the number of advertisements, 15% are out of sector, a bunch are part-time. That number comes down a little bit. It's still a big number, but it comes down. It comes down significantly from 6,000 or 7,000, depending on what you're looking at.
Absolutely.
All right. So if that concludes, I think that concludes professional services. We will move forward to the next slide. We're getting there. We're almost done. All right. So next, we're going to look at construction. And when we look at construction, construction represents 7,180 filled and unfilled jobs in our 10-county region. That 7,180 corresponds to, what that means is it represents 5.4% of our total economy. You can see that 5.4%, how it compares to the Kentucky and the U.S. average. It's kind of right there, running neck and neck with state and national average. Three-year percent change in average annual wage growth at 7.2%. That's a strong number over the last 3 years. And that number is right in line with what, we've seen with the state and slightly behind with, kind of the national average for construction wages. Looking to the middle, number of job advertisements over the last 30 days, only 49. And I will say, since we started doing this report in September, this number gets lower and lower every month. It's kind of interesting. Now, I think what we're dealing with here in December is, part of it has to do with construction typically slows down in the wintertime in cold weather. So I think that has a lot to do with this number coming down. And we'll look at those numbers on our last slide of this presentation, but only 49, and that was 49 job advertisements across 15 occupations. Who are the top 5 companies posting? People Ready had a whopping 4 advertisements. That was number 1, followed by Home Advisor with 3 advertisements. Here's an interesting one. MOI Maryland Occupancy Inspections. So there's an entity that's not even here, that somebody, an entity out of Maryland advertising in our zip codes. They had 3 advertisements. Then Purdue Farms, and then Aerotech. Top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days. At number 1, construction laborers with 13 positions. Number 2, construction and building inspectors, 7 positions. Electricians, 6. Plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters, 5 advertisements. And first line supervisors of construction trade workers, 4 job advertisements. And we have the wage data associated there. So in terms of analysis, again, 49 job advertisements out of a total of 6,151 for the month of December. I think that's like 0.5%. It's less than 1% of all job advertisements. Job advertisements are for construction, so very, very low. We've talked about this before. Part of the reason for that is that we use Jobs EQ to call this data out of jobs that are being advertised in Indeed and Monster and Career Builder. Well, it costs pretty good money to advertise on those platforms. And, a lot of with the bulk of the folks running construction, that have construction companies, they're not spending money to advertise on national platforms like Indeed or Monster or Career Builder. It's just, it's not, I don't think it's a good use of their money. They don't do it. And so I think that's why the number is in part very low. Most of those folks have they have people they can call, or they have places in town where they can go find day laborers, go find who they need to do the work. And then on top of that, it's just being the month of December, I think demand is down for construction at the moment anyway. It's very, it speaks to the seasonal nature of construction. All right, so last thing on the analysis, just top 3 job titles. 10 advertisements were for general laborer, 3 were for mortgage field inspector, and 2 were for highway technician assistant. And that was actually listed by the state of Kentucky. So let me pause there and see if either of you have a questions or comments about construction. Okay, I think it's probably I sound like a broken record because this is the construction has been very consistent what we've seen since we started these reports back in September. So let's move to the last sector. Okay, so our last sector that we're going to talk about today is transportation, distribution, and logistics. Again, this is really a cluster of interrelated positions. And when we look at it, there are 4,248 transportation, distribution, logistic jobs in our 10-county region. That represents filled and unfilled positions. Transportation distribution, or TDL for short, TDL represents 3.2% of our regional employment. And you can see how that compares to Kentucky, which is 6.1%, and the U.S. average of 4.6%. So, obviously, as a cluster of jobs, we lag the state national average, which really surprises me, given that the fact that we sit on a lot of our region sits on I-65, a major northwest corridor, and we have a major east-west corridor parkway that runs through our region as well. So anyway, it is our smallest sector for our 10-county region. 5.8% 3-year percent change in average annual wage growth, which is right in line with the state and the national average for these jobs. Total number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, 1,045 across 18 occupations. Top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days. So I briefly mentioned Total Transport of Mississippi early on in this presentation. They had 41 job advertisements. And again, this is a company that is based in Mississippi and has no infrastructure here. They have no physical locations in our region where they're dropping a load, picking up a load. There's no hub, but they do advertise very heavily in our region for over-the-road truck driving positions. Number 2, UPS with 31 job advertisements. Number 3, Nussbaum Transportation, like the first example, that Nussbaum is out of Hudson, Illinois, and they're just advertising for truck drivers that reside in our region. Number 4, Brown Trucking. Number 5, Tractor Supply Company with 24 advertisements. Okay, so what were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days? Again, heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, you folks, they're looking for folks with the CDLA. And, again, 540 job advertisements with a little red star. And if you look in the analysis to the little red star there, out of that 544 jobs advertised, 386 or 71% of those advertisements were by companies that do not reside in our region. So kind of hit on this pretty heavily today, but that 71%, I mean, that's consistent. We've seen that number vary from 68% to 75%. I mean, this is just very common in the trucking industry like I showed up early on in our presentation today. You put it out an advertisement and you just run it in zip codes all over the place. And so, if we have a zip code in our region, Total Transport of Mississippi or another company, they're not just hitting Bowling Green or Glasgow or Franklin. I mean, they're hitting Cub Run, and they're hitting Adairville. They're hitting the smaller communities, the smaller places that have zip codes in our region. All right, so back to the middle center after truck drivers. At number 2, stockers and order fillers, 176 job advertisements. Number 3, labor and freight stock and material movers. At number 4, light truck drivers. Number 5, sales and sales workers. these are usually folks that are driving, maybe Coca-Cola trucks, or, the folks that are filling vending machines, or they're filling orders with, they're taking products to retailers to deliver and sell. So, okay, so, to the analysis, again, TDL makes up 3.2% of our economy, but is representing 17% of all the job advertisements. So this is pretty consistent. Even though it's a small part of our economy, it makes up a pretty good chunk of the jobs being advertised every month. Number 2 bullet there, and I found this interesting, number 2 bullet there in the analysis is that of all the TDL jobs advertised, of all of them, not just the truck driver, but of all the advertisements, 41% were for part-time positions, which I thought that jumps out at me as being really high. I would not expect a large percentage of jobs in TDL to be part-time, but apparently they are. I have no explanation for it. I haven't figured out why, but that's what the data is telling us.
I do know, John, to that point, that many of the UPS jobs throughout the country historically have been part-time work. UPS recruits very, very heavily at college campuses for part-time employment. So that may be, a factor contributing to that number.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So, and UPS is obviously a big advertiser. FedEx may do the same.
I would imagine so. And then, Tractor Supply as well. I think a lot of these, a lot of the warehouse types of roles can be done part-time and sometimes are advertised as part-time work.
Okay, very good. That's good. That's good insight. Any other comments or questions?
No, great information.
All right, well, let's move to our final bit of analysis, and these are just data trends. So what I wanted to show you here is kind of a 5-month snapshot of what these numbers have looked like in total and by sector, and how they've kind of either gone up or down. And so what you'll see on this slide, we start with August of 2020 and run it through December. But, if we look to August 2020, back, at that time, there were 7,442 jobs advertised in the month of August. And there's a breakdown underneath that of how many were retail, hospitality, food, manufacturing, healthcare, and so on. And it kind of goes month by month on what those numbers look like. You can see the total number, and then you're either going to see a green number with an up arrow, and that shows the number went up from month to month, or a red number and a down arrow, and it shows how many that the number went down between the months. So you can see that between August of 2020, when there were 7,442 jobs that were advertised, in September, that number jumped to 7,749, an increase of 307. But then in October, and we're talking total jobs across our 10-county region, but then in October, that number goes down by 531. In October, it went down by 531. In November, it dropped significantly by 1,105. But in December, the total number increased by 35 over the November numbers. So you can see, we've alluded to November and December seeing kind of a large decrease. And where this is most significant, and I mentioned this before earlier, retail, hospitality, food. I mean, if you look at where retail, hospitality, food was in September of 2020, which was 2,310 job advertisements, that was the high number. Since then, it's steadily gone down. It's gone down by 918 to to the month of December. So obviously that sector has been really, really impacted since the high numbers in September to the latest data in December. And that, again, we largely attribute that to COVID-19 and to mandates to restrict either close restaurants to in-person service or reduce the capacity of restaurants to serve how many customers they can serve and what have you. Most of the other sectors have remained pretty steady. With the other exception being construction. Construction, again, a high number in September of 128 advertisements to the recent number of 49. Again, I kind of beat that dead horse. That's the fact that jobs in construction typically aren't advertised on the platforms that this data gets pulled from, and then the seasonal nature of construction is that there's a decrease in the number of jobs in the winter time. Anything else on this slide jump out at you or that I can touch on?
I think you've hit everything that that I really see interesting here from a trend 5-month snapshot perspective.
Okay, Leslie, anything?
Sorry, I was muted. I think having this snapshot is extremely beneficial. And I think the more we do these and the more data we collect, I'm just interested to watch trends. I think it's very beneficial to see, we go through the specific industries, but seeing, hey, here's the really big view from above as to what's happening, with the advertised jobs.
Yeah, and that really ties into sort of like the predictive nature of what we want to do for those who are changing careers, those who are new in their career, looking for a career, so they can see over a period of time, this is how the sectors have fluctuated.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I would just add that I think pre-COVID, what was being published was here's an open jobs report for how many jobs are open right now, and a projection for what they're going to be several years from now, and the numbers were large. And I think I think we're in this point in time, we're in this place with COVID-19 where projections and models, it's very difficult right now to project what our economy is going to look like 5 years from now. We don't even know what it's going to look like 5 months from now with COVID. We don't know if this is going to get worse, going to get better. The speed of how speedily the vaccine will roll out, and we'll get back to normal. And so I like the idea of us collecting this data and kind of seeing it in the near term, having a much better picture of it, what it looks like in the near term, so that as we kind of come out of this COVID period, we can be a little bit more sure in some of our predictions.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's. I think that's our last significant data slide. I think we have just one or two concluding remarks. Sure. Okay, quick summary. And if you stayed with us the whole time, thank you. There'll be nothing new that I talk on here. But first bullet there in summary is that, we have seen approximately 20% decline in the number of jobs being advertised over the last 60 days in our region. Again, the retail, hospitality, food is making up a huge percentage of that. That's the cluster that's taken the biggest, seen the largest decrease in the number of job advertisements, and again, largely due to COVID. But despite this 20% decline, we still have a lot of jobs that are being advertised, thousands. And so I think that speaks to the strength of our economy in South Central Kentucky, that we still do have a lot of positions that are open and that need to be filled. And then just the last piece of analysis for you is that, early on in COVID, you go back to April, May, June timeframe, our local unemployment rate got up to 17, 18%. And then it has steadily decreased since since those highs of what we were seeing in the June timeframe. In November, we had a 4.8% unemployment rate. December's 4.8. So I think we've what I'm seeing anyway is that we've leveled off a bit in terms of our unemployment. It's come down, but it's kind of leveled off at that 4.7, 4.8%, at least over the last 60 days. This is, so the good news is that we're doing better than the national average, which is at 6.7%, but that 4.7, 4.8% rate is still not what it was when we, in 2019, when our rates were never exceeded 4%. So we still have a ways to go in bringing that unemployment rate back down. So that's my summary, pending any other comments from Leslie or Robert.
John, something that just struck me is I think this information, I'm really starting to see how beneficial this information is for the job seeker, because they may hear a number thrown out. Oh, we've got 6,500 open jobs, or we've got 7,000 open jobs, and they're struggling because they can't get hired. And these numbers should be extremely insightful for them, because they can see, well, as a whole, that may be what it looks like, but let's look at these numbers in a deeper context, and you can see how many jobs in this area are actually available. And it's much more competitive, I think, than people would think, because if they hear a big number being talked about, they may think, oh, it's going to be easy to get a job. There's so many out there. And to me, it just reiterates the importance of job seekers working with us, because we can help them elevate their resume. We can help them, to where they stand out as the strongest candidate. So that's just what struck me today. I know that we go through similar data every month, but every time we do this, I notice something different, and that's what stood out for me today.
All right.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Leslie. So I've had job seekers actually tell me that they've heard the 6,000, 7,000 number, and they ask, well, why am I having such a hard time finding one of these jobs? I never get a call back, or I get to the point of an interview, but we fall short of signing and starting. So I think that's a really good point. And also, I want people to know, just as you did speak to just a little bit ago, we are here to help. So on our website, www.southcentralworkforce.com, you'll find some contact forms. Those aren't contact forms that will go into some abyss somewhere. It doesn't go into some black hole. We have people staffed on those contact forms. So if you just fill that out, it only takes a minute. We'll reach out to you. We'll take a customized approach to helping you find a job. And in addition, we have an employer contact form as well. So if you're an employer looking for work, I would say if you're an employer, these days it's hard to rely on the labor exchanges of the world, because the marketplace is changing so quickly. So we've put together a brief contact form that's really gives us what you need in real time, and we can have a customized approach to filling the job vacancies that you have. So I would go to our website and look at those forms if you're a job seeker or if you're an employer.
Absolutely. And, coming to a theater near you soon is My Workforce Future. And so as check out our social media and look for some announcements on that. We've got some great solutions for employers and job seekers alike when we roll out this new My Workforce Future initiative. Leslie, do you want to say anything else on social media and following us?
Well, social media is one of what I think one of the best ways to stay informed. It's very easy. Most people are on some form of social media currently, so it's very easy just to start following us. I have our handle at SCKYWDB, and it's that same handle for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And we are constantly making posts. They may be about job openings, they may be about trainings, opportunities, but that is a very easy way to stay ahead of the game. And it's something you're already doing. You're already on your phone scrolling through social media. Why not use social media as a tool for your career as well? And I would just, again, encourage everyone to follow us.
All right. Well, I believe that concludes our session today.
Yes.
So I appreciate everybody tuning in and sticking with us, and hopefully you found this information very helpful.
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks.
All right.